Hello, it's Marty Lee here and welcome to the ReNewy Living podcast. This is a show that helps you live sustainably. All it takes is a reduce and reuse and start where you live approach. Based in Newcastle, Australia, each conversation will be with changemakers in my community who are doing good for people and planet. You'll discover how community, culture and our natural environment intertwine to create a positive environmental impact. Together, we'll learn how to naturally embed sustainability into our unique lifestyles. So join me on the ReNewy Living podcast. You frequently hear the phrase circular economy from governments and businesses. But do you know what it really means from a local community perspective? Without going round and round in circles, here to chat about all things circular economy is Thomas Michel and Bianca Bartlett. They're from the Newcastle non-profit startup known as the Full Circle Collective. Welcome, Bianca, and welcome, Thomas.
Hi there.
Thanks for having us.
How did you two get together?
When we very first had this purple card project idea, I emailed City of Newcastle and I was just working out what we needed to do in terms of running projects in the city, if we needed council approval to do like a park cleanup. And they forwarded my email on to Thomas.
And the stand-up project for me that Bianca was involved in was the Wallsend Op Shop Trail, because I thought is a great industry to be supporting and just needed a little bit of revitalization in Wallsend. You know, there's lots of op shops, but the main street didn't really have much of a spark.
With the purposes of local community and trying to spark a good local community that's all about sustainability, how did then that funnel just that little bit further into developing the Full Circle Collective?
I suppose through Purple Card, we've been slowly building up this community of like-minded individuals, people who are really interested in how we can have a small-scale impact in our community. And with every project we've had, we've kind of touched base with Thomas and had a bit of chat with him about it. He's always got some really great ideas. And then Thomas came to me with this harebrained idea about creating this circular economy hub in Newcastle. A lot of that actually intertwined with another project idea we were working on to create a community textile recovery hub. So we've amalgamated those ideas into the Full Circle.
And I guess the really exciting opportunity for it was, or is, the space, to have a physical space where you can establish yourself that immediately takes the project to a next level too. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity because we can invite suppliers in and different members of the community who may have all sorts of different projects to do with recovered materials or repairing or refurbishment, but they just don't have the physical space to enact them. And now we do. So we can be this enabler through this project. It's not really about us. It's not really about the space. It's about the network and who we can be tapping into using that space.
You won't be getting this space until October 2024. How did that become available to you?
We approached the Ian and Shirley Norman Foundation with a pitch. The Ian and Shirley Norman Foundation are a local family trust. They're a giving charity. They bought a building in Hunter Street and we knew that they wanted to have a community of practice in that building, supporting community and other social enterprises. So we went and pitched our idea to them and it fit in with a lot of their values, and we came up with an agreement for them to let us test our idea out in their space. It's pretty amazing.
With your space for the Full Circle Collective, what will it look like, and then what kind of people will come into your space?
That's a very good question, and we're not entirely sure.
Unfounded, new initiative.
It might change again in a couple of weeks. But the way we envisage it at the moment is definitely a place brimming with lots of diverse products from dozens and dozens of different suppliers. We hope mainly from the local area too. Social enterprises, sole traders, startups who haven't quite found their commercial feet, SMEs, community organizations who are doing something with recovered products. We're also very much hoping that there will be repair services there on site as well to be determined exactly who fits in to that mold, but we think that there's great space for that. And our dream is to have a repair in residence, hopefully even full-time, and perhaps rotating different types of repair services. And of course, a big emphasis is also going to be on the community aspect too. So have it as a real gathering place, lots of workshops and provision for big groups, a couple of dozen people or more to comfortably fit in and have making workshops, repairing workshops there on site. And again, a really reduced cost to enable people with minimal financial barriers to be able to come in and use that space.
The Full Circle Collective as a name is a really neat name. How did you come across the name and why?
We had quite a lot of back and forwards with the names, and late one night, I think Thomas texted it through to me, and I was busy doing something else and kind of went, oh, that's kind of cool, and continued. And the next day we were chatting. He said, what did you think of that? Oh, I haven't processed it yet. Let me look back. And I looked through his list and went, yeah, that's the one.
Unpacking the meaning of circular economy in something that's translatable and understandable to many people. And the image of a circle is obviously that. And we really like the idea of something fulsome and full too. So it's like full of abundance and sharing. And we thought tag on the collective as well to put the message that this is a group project. So we really want to be including
It really
others.
emphasises that community aspect of it.
Absolutely.
The Full Circle Collective is all about circular economy. But what does the terminology circular economy actually mean?
Going back to the imagery of a circle, it's a way of thinking about how we produce, make, consume, and dispose of things, the material world around us. So it's positioned as an alternative to what they call a linear economic model, where it's about taking, extracting out of the ground, making, producing things, and then disposing. So a different way of approaching a take, make, dispose economic model. And with circular, there's 3 principles that it works under. One is about designing out waste. The second is keeping resources in circulation and in use at their highest value for as long as possible. And the third principle is regenerating natural systems. So all 3 of those principles really provide a positive alternative to this linear take, make, dispose model.
With the circular economy, it's great that you've just explained there are 3 main principles for the design of circular economy. Generally speaking, what do you think the weakest link is for the circular economy?
The biggest challenge for circular economy, I think, is the waste. So it's something that's so entrenched and intrinsic to how our economy and how our societies work, is we're generating more and more waste. It's not with the growing population, waste is growing, but also per capita in developed countries, our waste volumes per capita are growing every year. And it's something that has become so culturally entrenched that we have become very much a throwaway culture. I think the challenge of our generation, of the century, to shift away from that. And the reason why I think there's an imperative around it too is it just simply can't work long term or even in the medium term. There's simply not enough resources and space for us to just continue on and pretend that we can just keep on digging it up and chucking it out ad nauseum. The biosphere simply won't cope with us humans behaving like this. So there's this imperative, but there's strong entrenched cultural values and behaviors that are there that we're up against too. So that shifting of our mindset away from waste and generating waste as someone else's problem to a much more circular system where we're thinking about the resources that we're using and how we can be harnessing that value for as long as possible. That's the biggest challenge, I think. And I think it's not just about individual behaviors too, about what we throw out. I think that's part of our social and cultural systems. We're putting all this emphasis on the individual consumer, but I think it's actually even more important to be thinking about the larger producers too, the corporate sector and how they're making things. And this is also the big challenge, is that the way corporations and their business sector is set up is very rational. It makes business sense for them to be what economists call externalizing the costs of pollution and waste onto the supplier or the retailer or the consumer, someone down the chain. So it's not actually those who maybe digging it up or making things that are taking responsible for the full life cycle of that product. There's lots and lots of legal and regulatory and practical barriers to shifting that responsibility back to producers too. There are slowly movements towards that too. So product stewardship, these sort of buzzwords are becoming more and more of a thing. And there's product stewardship legislation that's slowly trickling in to Australia. But a lot of corporate resistance to those sorts of laws too, because it's a total disruption of the business model that's worked very fine for the high end of town for many, many generations.
The Full Circle Collective is looking at ways to reuse waste.
One of our first goals with the Full Circle Collective is to support suppliers who are already doing that locally, people who are looking at waste as a resource rather than something that belongs in landfill, and they're turning that into new wonderful things. To support that, we will have workshops which will teach us how to, again, look at our waste as resources within our own homes and how we can recreate that into something more useful, looking at those 10 R's, repair, reuse, repurpose, all the others.
Yeah, it's a pretty big list, but everything hence the name ReNewy Living, because it's all about that factor, isn't it? Like that's what all the circularity is all about.
Yeah, I think we're creating that place where people can feel really confident that they can come into our retail store, they can buy something that has been designed with a good purpose in mind, with minimising waste and working with those circular economy principles. In saying that, we recognise that not everyone is 100% there in the circular economy. Not everything's going to be 100% circular. And so we want to celebrate those who are taking those steps towards that as well.
So celebrating like those who do an aspect or a principle of circular economy really well and make an effort.
We want to recognise those businesses that are actually thinking about that in their design. It's not always a cheap process as well. And so they're stepping outside of that business as usual, disrupting those processes in their industries.
I think design is really such an important aspect to circular economy, which we're not directly working in that area, but we're definitely trying to encourage it. Planned obsolescence. It's a really, really common thing with so many industrial and consumer goods too. There's mattresses being a classic example, white goods, electronic goods. They're something that we come across every day and all could very easily be designed to be much, much more circular. With mattresses, for example, you could just put a zipper around the outside, and when you need to, say, replace the stuffing or if a spring breaks, you can pull that out, or even the cover around it, replace all that. And there's very, very few mattresses out there that have that sort of design function within them, because it probably costs another $2 per unit to have that in.
Years ago, when you used to buy a mattress, you used to buy a mattress where you could flip it like this way and then flip it over onto the other side and then flip it around again. So there'd be many ways that you could reuse a mattress. But I find that these days you can't. There's only one side that you can sleep on and you can only flip it one way. So it means that we're going through our mattresses a lot more.
Yeah, and it comes back to this rational business model within this blinkered closed system of the mattress producer just wants to sell as many mattresses as possible, and they'll manufacture as many as they can. If they're not responsible for the end product, the full life cycle of their product, they're not interested in extending the life of that product by another 5 or 10 or 20 years. Let's just sell a new one. It's a crazy mentality when you step back and look at it systemically, but it works for the one individual firm. White goods is another classic example. Everything's pop riveted in, so it becomes impossible. So if you just remove that one element of not using pop rivets and spot welds, and you had panels that were disassemblable, there's your repair problem gone, 90% of it gone there. You can access the little motor that's in the back of a washing machine, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, really difficult to do it now.
It just seems like such a simple solution. Like we know the solution. How does it get to the corporations that it matters?
Part of it is, as you said, Thomas, that it doesn't make sense for them to be making a mattress that's going to last for 50 years because they want to sell as many mattresses as possible and as many dishwashers or fridges as possible. But this is where that idea of products as a service comes into play. None of us have the desire to own a fridge or a microwave or a mattress, but we still require them in our lives. So the idea of having a product as a service means that you could actually rent it, and then at the end of its life, that manufacturer can take it back and repurpose it into a new product. This kind of eliminates that need to change the design so much. They have the materials and machinery there on site to be able to upgrade or repair their machines, and we don't need to be responsible for that. So I suppose it's one way of negating that change in design.
And this is what we're trying to encourage in a small way through this space, through the Full Circle Collective. There's lots of really viable business models that can provide circular solutions to keep us living comfortably and conveniently, but just do it a little bit more cleverly and with a lot more with resource recovery at the heart of it. As Bianca said, product as a service, I think, is a great example too. I don't want to own a washing machine. I just want clean clothes every week. That's actually what I want. I don't need to own that forevermore, that one unit. So if I can rent or lease or share a washing machine and use it when I need it, and then if it breaks, the supplier comes and picks up and fixes it and gives me back a one that works fine, great. That is a much more materially efficient solution that can be a bit of a win-win for a business and for the consumer that just needs a little bit of government encouragement and incentivization to work.
Who has the greatest responsibility for starting a circular economic approach? Is it the people who need to start with the design, or is the greatest number of influence going to come from people like yourselves at Full Circle Collective?
There's this motto that gets bandied around a bit in circular economy circles that design is responsible for 80% of the issue. If you can get design right, then you've got 80% of your problem solved.
So to all the designers out there, please put your designing hats on.
Yeah, and again, it's not just about, say, industrial designers, or it can also be about creative innovators who are looking at processes and systems too, and just getting back to this idea of a product as a service. So being able to thinking about leasing a product and having repairers on staff instead. Well, that's a type of design.
The biggest circular economy stakeholders that we hear a lot about is government and businesses. I just read a report by the Office of Energy and Climate Change. It was a January 2023 report, and it was talking about solar panels. We're being pushed for renewable energy, and that's really important for us to go forward because we can't just rely on fossil fuels. However, in the whole report, it was all linking it to circular economy. And I was really struggling with this, that at the moment we don't have a really good circular economy system for solar panels, from the minerals to being extracted right to the end of life of that solar panel. Can you shed some more light on it?
Boom tish. In defense of the solar power industry, even with this waste stream or this looming waste problem here, it's still multiple times more efficient and more environmentally friendly than burning coal in power stations. And I think power generation solutions like that, a lot of the waste and the pollution is just done out of sight, out of mind. Here at Aroaring locally, just down the road at Lake Macquarie, they've got a stockpile, I believe it's in the order of above 40 million tons of fly ash, of basically soot from the power plant there that's just sitting on the side of the lake. And never mind all the atmospheric pollution that's been released over the years from that. So none of that waste stream is around with solar panels. But yes, it's now becoming a real thing in Australia because we've been one of the first countries to really uptake solar panels rooftop on residential properties with gusto. And I think it's up to about 1 in 4 households in Australia now already has solar. Looking at global averages, it's really, really high, impressive rates. But it does beg the question, what happens with the waste from it too? A couple of really pertinent points on that. Firstly, it's worth applying circular design principles to that industry as well too, and not just treating solar panels as disposable items, which They often are in the building industry. And that's probably problem number one. So a solar panel, how they've been designed right now, can easily work very, very effectively 25 to 30 years. There's issues, say, with refurbishments of homes or whatnot, after 10 or 15 years, or perhaps a solar panel, for whatever reason, stopping to function. And the solution up to now has been this is the first order of these problems coming online right now. The knee-jerk solution to that problem right now is just to chuck them away. They're too hard to recycle, to do anything with. But we need industry-scale solutions to be solving this problem. And they're out there. There's small startup companies trying to crack this problem now already. A great local example is Second Life Solar. They're Newcastle and Dubbo-based. I know some very clever people, some CSIRO and ex-CSIRO people. It's really about applying those circular economy principles to that industry. So first step, as I understand it, with this one business model, is that the first thing they'll do is just go and test this thing. So do a scan of the panels, work out if it's actually still functioning, if the different cells are still functioning, or if it's just some of them are non-functional, or if it's something to do with the inverter or aspects that can be a really, really simple $5 fix, and then bang, you've got a functional solar panel again. They just dismount the panels, and they've got a very quick testing device for the panels to check its functionality. And some of the initial data they're getting back is the vast majority of solar panels that are quote unquote being decommissioned are actually perfectly fine, either as is or with a very, very simple low cost fix up. They can be put back into energy production.
I like the sound of that because that's all about technology. Technology is not my strong point, and it's also about innovative technology, and they've obviously worked out a solution to help things last a lot longer.
And of course, there's ways of designing solar panels where you can disassemble, and there's great aluminium and there's silicon there too. And once you get the processes right, you can actually make them back into solar panels or use them for other purposes. So the absolute biggest no-no to do with that waste stream is just to chuck them in landfill. There's plenty of other applications that we can be using those old solar panels for. And I think first step is being really careful with not decommissioning solar panels too quickly.
Bianca, have you got any localized examples of businesses who you've connected with who are doing really good things?
The first one that comes to mind, I think they're probably a local shining star in the circular economy space, is Resourceful Living. So Resourceful Living are recycling plastics into new products. They've got tables and chairs, breadboards. They're now moving more into the building supplies as well, being able to create big panels that at some point should be able to replace bench tops in kitchens and tiles in bathrooms. So they're really durable and mold resistant. And so they're a really great product that they've come up with. And something I'm really excited about is we're actually doing a research and development project with them at the moment, recycling 100% polyester clothing, which actually the polyester in our clothes is the same material as in a plastic water bottle. And so we're recycling that into hopefully shelving at some point soon to be for sale in the Full Circle Collective.
Wonderful. That, again, is a great example of collaboration. And I know that you've dealt a lot in textile waste over the years with Purple Card Project. And polyester clothing, it's problematic. It's there forever.
Yeah, it is.
There's still different types of polyester. I'm no scientist, but it definitely feels different. But it's not easy to just recycle it.
No. With 100% polyester, we do have the capacity in Australia to repelletize it, and then it can be used in a lot of different ways. But the problem comes when it's actually mixed with other materials. So quite often you'll get a poly cotton, a certain percentage of that is now cotton, and the cotton is now trapped within that polyester, and it means that that material can't actually be repelletized. Part of the research that we're doing with Resourceful Living is what percentage they can actually, of cotton or other contaminants they can handle in that process. So hopefully we come up with a really nice way to deal with a very large proportion of textiles that are getting rejected from op shops every day.
How does the circular economy create value in our community?
By keeping things in use for longer means that we don't have to be purchasing new items. It means that we're keeping resources in the ground.
Waste is just a term that we've used more and more, and it's actually a misnomer. It's a bit of a distraction from what the materials and what the resources actually are. So often what we throw out in landfill is definitely not waste. There's a lot of use value and economic value in that. So it's about capturing that economic value to be used again and again. And there's great commercial business models, very, very viable, commercially viable business models that can capture that value. And we're trying to be a part of that too. This idea, as Bianca was saying, a product as a service, something like a washing machine or an office fit out or a building even. If it breaks down and you as the supplier can go back in and fix it up for $50, and then you've pretty well got a functioning unit that you can go out and sell again or lease again and get another years and years and years of income stream from it. Well, there you go. That's how it creates more commercial value for the economy. And I think that simple example can just be applied in many, many, many different settings and businesses and industries too. So this is the thing about the linear economic model. You pretty well have a peak of value, that end point where it's sold to the consumer, and then it's considered, well, done. It's there's no use for that company because they've already shipped it out of their doors. It's out of the factory gate, and the retailer have it off the showroom floor. Done. And it's a really narrow way of thinking about commercial opportunities.
And just like reverse garbage in Sydney, when they say that waste is a resource, it truly is. If you can think about waste differently, I've always known waste as rubbish, but I always see waste as a resource, and that's essentially what you're aiming to do.
I think it's a mindset shift towards waste as a resource.
I'm quite fascinated with waste myself, and breaking down that word, it comes from the Latin vastum, or it is probably closer, traditionally, it's closer aligned to ideas of like the wastelands, this uninhabitable area that's humans can't live on. Well, that's not at all how we use it now. Like, waste is all around us, and we've got a quote unquote waste facility here inside the local government area. Well, it's not really waste. It's not this uninhabitable other. It's become all around us too. And so I think, the idea of what we label as waste is really a misnomer.
Waste has become very sanitized feeling as well. You go to the tip now and it's very well organized and places to put things in everywhere. And it still sometimes feels like it's a bit disconnected from what it is. But there's so many opportunities that we can use waste.
I think that's where an organisation, Salamander Bay Recycling Centre, is really doing it right. They're actually positioned right next to the transfer station, so where all the rubbish is going for the whole peninsula up near Salamander Bay. And they're able to salvage the metals. They've got a big op shop where they sell anything that's of value. If you want a bike, a washing machine, any kind of garden supplies, you go to Salamander Bay Recycling Centre and you can get it. These are things that people, they no longer wanted, but someone else has a need for them.
And on a bigger scale, I think another great example is this company called Built, this large building consortium that works across Australia and is into building large infrastructure projects and large skyscrapers. They're the ones, for instance, they're commissioned to be building the Atlassian headquarters going in around Central Station down in Sydney. They've got some really, really interesting projects that are very much circular design principles factored into them too. So building things modular, and they really practice what they preach too. Even their own offices in Sydney, it's on the site of a daggy old building, I think from the 1930s or 1940s, that conventionally would have just been knocked down, and they would have just put sort of a chrome and steel and mirrors new office building up. Well, instead, what they did is they gutted out the bits that weren't functional anymore, but they left the shell and then built a very modern building using that old shell and whatever they could salvage from the existing structure. And that one design decision alone saved the carbon emissions in the waste stream by over half of what a conventional build would be. Yeah. And it's a really funky great designed building that's got a lot of character. So you've got, new mixed with the old. You've got great, naked brick walls and beams mixed in with modern products and design. I think a really important point to make too about looking at what's practical and what's viable, and people, I guess, stuck in this mindset of like, well, how can you really change things? That's just the way business works here. And, that's just the way things are. Well, not really. It's an important point to return to is that the Australian economy and how households consume and throw away and how businesses and manufacturers produce and also throw away their waste is really, really inefficient compared to the rest of the world. There's many, many different ways of measuring it, but in terms of, say, material consumption per capita, here in Australia, we consume on average about 46 tons per year, and that's about 3 times the amount of the OECD average. So we're not talking about the rest of the world and, the Horn of Africa countries or anything like that. We're talking about the advanced economies of Europe and North America. Compared to them, Australia is really, really wasteful.
That is a phenomenal statistic that you've just thrown at us. It just seems like a lot.
Yeah.
I know you're talking in tons. It's hard to get my head around.
And so we're not talking about the natural resources or raw resources that we're digging up out of the ground like iron ore or coal and shipping overseas. This is about per capita material consumption here in Australia. If you look at productivity rates too, of how much economic activity we generate per kilo of stuff, again, Australia really, really low, about half of the rate of the OECD off 2019 figures, but we produce about $1.64 of economic value per kilo of stuff. That's compared to over $3 of economic activity for an OECD average. And in clever old Switzerland, they're creating about $10 of economic value and activity for each kilo consumed and produced.
What are they doing that we need to improve on?
I think they're selling a lot of overpriced watches.
The original Swatch watch, you could switch out the band and the timepiece.
Yeah, I think they're doing it too. You can return the bands, and they can probably very easily, I imagine they would have it in their business model, melt them down and make them into new ones too. So, that sort of thing works quite well if you've got systems worked out for it.
Behaviour change is one of those hard things. I've done some reading about littering in our community, and that's been going on since industrialisation. And we're still, all these years later, still having marketing materials about don't litter.
I just got an EPA grant to do 2 litter cleanup projects.
Congratulations for getting the grant.
Thank you. But this is simply about community engagement and showing the shift that we need to have about how we think about our rubbish and our waste. And yeah, it's crazy that we've been thinking about litter for so many years, but we're still seeing it on our streets and not a lot has actually changed. Australia this year actually hit a record for now becoming the highest consumers of textiles in the whole world. So we actually now purchase more clothing than the US.
Again, you're throwing at me like lots of amazing stats that I didn't even know existed.
I don't know if these numbers are going to resonate with your listeners, but the average Australian purchases 56 new items of clothing per year. So that doesn't include socks or undies as well.
And that's more than 1 item a week. I can do my maths.
Yeah. Well done. That equates to 800,000 tonnes of textiles each year. And that's a huge number, right? That's a huge number of clothing that is hard to visualise. But what's crazy about it is 1/3 of that, or the equivalent to 208 Olympic swimming pools, is actually discarded, thrown away. It's got no other use in these people's minds. It's just gone. So it's gone either into landfill or it's getting exported overseas. And the problem with that is we don't know what's happening when it goes overseas. It's usually ending up in a country where they are less able to deal with it than we are. Talking about behaviour change, I suppose I'd like to challenge your listeners. So there's 3 of us in the room. If each one of us can encourage 3 more people to repair or repurpose an item of clothing, and then we can start seeing that ripple effect of someone maybe repairing or repurposing a piece of clothing instead of buying a new piece of clothing. And each year, with a little bit of influence from those who are feeling quite passionate about it, hopefully we'll see a reduction in that number of items of clothing that we're purchasing in Australia.
Fingers crossed. And there's a bit of a skill in that, but if you were saying before with the Full Circle Collective, helping people to repair their clothes, then that is a great start as well.
I think it's important to remember that this whole term circular economy is just really a fancy branding for some old traditions too, and things that in generations past was just a given. You mend things, you go to the cobbler, you go to the seamstress with clothes, and you try to actually extend the life of these things as long as possible. And even going, back further and from different to indigenous knowledge systems too, around custodianship and caring for country and looking towards regenerative patterns and systems and cycles too. These are all really important things for us to be tapping into. So a circular economy is not anything new. I think of it really as about a rebranding of some strong old traditions and traditional knowledges that have been around for as long as humans have been around.
Thank you so much for helping to explain that it is a phrase that's just sort of been put there to help explain it simply, but it is great to know that historically it has always been there.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to Awesome Newcastle for their support.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the ReNewy Living podcast. This podcast was recorded on Awabakal country. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and waters in the Newcastle and Lake Macquarie region of New South Wales. I hope you're feeling more confident about doing better for our people and planet by taking a start where you live approach to living sustainably. If this episode has spurred you into action, please feel free to follow and share it with your friends. It would mean the world to me. Head over to my website, renewyliving.com.au for the show notes and blog posts from this episode. And you can also sign up to my regular emails. I look forward to sharing more stories with you next time.